Okay, now we're going to be looking at chapter 2 in Bryman, social research strategies, looking at quantitative research and qualitative research, sort of big picture items. There will be, again, much repetition and deepening of information as we go through the course, but I'm just going to walk us through some of the ideas in chapter 2. So, Merton's contribution. So, who was Merton? Robert Merton was a prominent sociologist, and he made significant contributions to the understanding of theory and social sciences. And in 1967, Merton distinguished between two types of theories: grand theories and middle range theories. Grand theories are theories highly abstract and broad in scope, and they aim to offer comprehensive explanations for social phenomenon. Some examples of grand theories include structural functionalism, which looks at society as a complex system with interrelated parts working together to promote stability and order. Middle range theories, unlike grand theories, operate within a limited domain. They're more focused and applicable to specific areas within the broader scope of grand theories. So, some examples of domains where middle range theories may apply might include something like juvenile delinquency, racial prejudice, educational attainment, ethnic relations. um, Clarid and Olin in 1960s differential association theory is an example of a middle range theory formulated specifically in connection with juvenile delinquency. Another example is Cohen's 2010 Postal Questionnaire Survey, which explored the relationship between hairstylists and their clients. Empirical relevance. So, middle range theories are particularly useful for empirical research because they address more concrete aspects of social life. They're practical in research contexts due to their narrower focus and ability to generate testable hypotheses within specific domains. In conclusion for this slide, understanding the distinction between grand and middle range theories is essential for students of social science as it is helpful in identifying the appropriate theoretical framework for research projects. Middle range theories, with their limited scope, offer valuable insights into specific social phenomenon and are particularly useful in applied research. Um, and we will again be revisiting this over and over again. So here's an introduction to empiricism, which is a fundamental philosophical approach that informs much of scientific inquiry and theory development. It asserts that the only valid knowledge comes from sensory experiences, meaning what we can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. According to empiricism, knowledge must be based on observable, measurable evidence. So, abstract reasoning without sensory input is not considered a reliable source of knowledge. Empiricism emphasizes the importance of rigorous scientific testing of theories. So, hypotheses must be tested through empirical evidence, through experiments and observations. And this approach is closely linked to the scientific method, where data collection and analysis are used to confirm or refute theories. Empiricism is associated with positivism, which is a philosophical stance that believes in an objective reality that could be understood through observation and reason. And positivism holds that all meaningful statements about the world are either empirically verifiable or logically necessary. So, in this empirical approach, the accumulation of observable quote unquote facts is crucial, and these facts serve as the data that theories must explain. Theories are value based on their ability to predict and explain these facts. The chapter goes into naive empiricism. So, I'm going to end my slide with a question mark. Naive empiricism, which refers to the critique that some forms of empiricism might be overly simplistic, and naive empiricism may imply an uncritical acceptance of data without considering the broader context or underlying theoretical assumptions. So, in conclusion, Empiricism is a powerful approach to knowledge, particularly when we're looking at the natural and social sciences. However, it is important to remain aware of its limitations and the potential pitfalls of a strictly empirical approach, such as the risk of naive empiricism. So this slide is contrasting two fundamental approaches to research and theory development, deductivism and inductivism. So deductivism starts with a theory or a general principle, and from there, researchers derive specific hypotheses, and then these hypotheses are tested against data. So the process involves confirming or rejecting the hypothesis based on the evidence. Deducti- Deductivism is closely associated with quantitative research methods, which rely on usually statistical analysis, numerical data, and often large sample sizes to test hypotheses. So, an example might be a researcher might begin with a theory that stress leads to lower academic performance and then collect data to confirm or refute this hypothesis. In contrast, inductivism works from the grounds up, starting with data collection and observation. And then from this data, researchers develop broader theories or general principles. This inductive reasoning involves making generalizations based on specific observations and is typically associated with qualitative research methods such as interviews, ethnographies, or case studies, where the goal is to understand deeper meanings and patterns. Grounded theory is a common approach within this, where theories emerge from the data. So, an example might be a researcher observing classroom interactions might develop a theory about the role of peer support in learning based on detailed qualitative observations. So while deductivism is more structured and focused on testing existing theories, inductivism is more exploratory and open ended, aiming to generate new theories. And both are valuable in research, but are used in different contexts depending on the research goals and the nature of the data. So, understanding the distinction between deductivism and inductivism is crucial for choosing the appropriate research method and approach, whether the aim is to test an existing theory or to develop a new one from observed data. So, deduction is a logical process where conclusions are drawn from a set of premises that are generally assumed to be true. So, it's a top down approach, starting with a general theory or principle and moving towards specific observations or conclusions. So, here are some steps. Here's an overview. As I'm showing here in the slide, um, this process, which is central to inquiry and hypothesis testing, starts with a theory. And this is a broad statement or principle that explains a set of phenomenon or predicts outcomes. So the theory serves as the foundation for developing specific hypotheses. Step two would be the hypothesis. So, from that theory, researchers derive a specific hypothesis, and this is basically a testable prediction that relates directly to the theory. So, the hypothesis provides a clear statement of what the researcher expects to find if the theory is correct. Step three is data collection, and data collection involves gathering empirical evidence to test the hypotheses. And this step is crucial as the quality and relevance of the data directly impact the validity of the subsequent findings. Step four, the findings are the results obtained from analyzing the data, and these findings are compared against the original hypothesis to determine whether the hypothesis is supported or contradicted by the evidence. Step five, the hypothesis is either confirmed or rejected. So, based on the findings supported by the data, we will find out, right, if it's either rejected or supported. And this step is critical for determining the accuracy and reliability of the hypothesis in relation to the theory. So, the revision of theory refers to, like, basically if the hypothesis is confirmed, the theory is strengthened. If the hypothesis is rejected, the theory may need to be revised or refined. And this revision helps to improve the accuracy and power of the theory, leading to further research and testing. So, in conclusion, The deductive process is iterative and self correcting, allowing for continuous refinement of theories based on empirical evidence, and it plays a key role in advancing scientific knowledge by systematically testing and validating theoretical concepts. So this slide introduces key questions in the philosophy of social science, particularly concerning what constitutes acceptable knowledge and the appropriateness of using scientific methods to study social phenomena. So the first question asks, what should be considered acceptable knowledge in the context of social science? And this touches on the epistemological foundation of research, what kinds of knowledge claims are valid and reliable. So, different research paradigms offer varying answers, with some emphasizing empirical measurable data while others value subjective experiential data. The second question probes whether the social world, with its complexities and subjective experiences, can be studied in the same rigorous, objective manner as the natural world. And this involves discussing the challenges of applying scientific principles such as objectivity, replicability, and quantification to human behavior and social interactions. The third question raises the issue of whether it's appropriate or even possible to apply methods typically used in the natural sciences to social science research. And this debate often centers around the potential for reductionism and the risk of oversimplifying social phenomenon by forcing them into frameworks designed for the physical sciences. Sorry. So positivism versus interpretivism. The final point on my slide here introduces two major approaches in social science. So again, positivism, the advocates for applying the scientific method to social research emphasize objectivity, measurement, and the search for general laws governing social behavior. And in interpretivism, the argument is that social reality is constructed by individuals and that understanding it requires interpreting the meanings and experiences of those involved. And this approach, once again, often relies on qualitative methods. So the tension between these two reflects broader debates about the nature of knowledge, the role of the researcher, and the goals of social science research. And these questions are central to the ongoing discourse in social science research, influencing how studies are designed, conducted, and interpreted. And researchers must navigate these debates to justify their methodological choices and contribute to the field's body of knowledge. So, realist epistemology is concerned with the nature of reality and our ability to know it, and it builds on the same principles or some of the same principles as positivism, but introduces some key distinctions, particularly in how we understand and interact with the social world. Um, what it shares with positivism is the belief that natural science methods are appropriate for studying the social world. And both of these posit that an external reality exists independently of our perceptions. And this means that reality is not just a construct of our minds, it exists out there and can be known, albeit imperfectly. Empirical realism, sometimes called naive realism, suggests that there is a close correspondence between reality and the language or terms we use to describe it. So, according to this view, we can have direct knowledge of the social world through our senses and observations, and this knowledge reflects the actual state of affairs. Critical realism, a more sophisticated form of realism, argues that our knowledge of reality is mediated by theoretical concepts. And this perspective suggests that while reality exists independently, our understanding of it is shaped by the theories and concepts we use to interpret it. Critical realism also emphasizes that there are underlying structures or mechanisms that generate observable events, and these structures may not be directly observable themselves, but they influence the phenomenon we can observe. For example, social structures like class, power, and institutions generate patterns of behavior and outcomes in society, even if those structures are not directly visible. So, in conclusion, realist epistemology provides a nuanced view of the relationship between theory and observation. It acknowledges the existence of an objective reality, but recognizes that our understanding of it is always mediated by theoretical frameworks. This approach is particularly useful in social sciences where underlying structures often shape observable phenomenon. So, An example of naive realism, a study on the impact of social media usage on mental health directly links observed data like hours spent on social media with mental health outcomes, assuming that these measures accurately and straightforwardly reflect reality without considering deeper underlying factors. An example for critical realism, a researcher studying poverty examines not just income levels, but also the underlying social and economic structures that perpetuate poverty, such as systemic inequality or access to education. And the researcher recognizes that while poverty can be measured, understanding it requires exploring the underlying mechanisms that cause it. So interpretive epistemology challenges the positivist approach by focusing on understanding the meaning of human actions rather than simply measuring and predicting behavior. It emphasizes the importance of subjective experiences and the context in which social actions occur. The nature of social sciences, which primarily deal with people and their interactions, requires methods that go beyond the empirical and objective approaches of positivism. Interpretive epistemology argues that understanding human behavior necessitates methods that can capture the complexity and subjectivity of social life. Um, so, this epistemological approach is concerned with the interpretation of human actions, understanding not just what people do, but why they do it. It delves into the meanings and intentions behind actions, requiring a deep engagement with the subjective experiences of individuals. So, Max Weber's central concept to interpretive epistemology refers to the process of understanding social action by seeing the world from the perspective of the individuals involved. And this approach seeks to uncover the meanings that people attach to their actions and the social context that influence these meanings. So, subjective reality, I guess you could look at it trying to see the world from the actor's perspective, emphasizing the importance of subjective reality. And so, according to Bogdan and Taylor in 1975, understanding social phenomenon requires immersing oneself in the experience of others to grasp how they perceive and interpret the world. Symbolic interactionism heavily influences interpretive epistemology. This theoretical framework posits that people create and communicate meaning through social interactions, and these meanings shape their reality. So, researchers using interpretive methods often explore how individuals and groups negotiate and construct shared meaning through interaction. So, in conclusion, interpretive epistemology provides a vital counterbalance to positivism in social science research. By focusing on meaning, context, and subjective experience, it offers us a richer and more nuanced understanding of human behavior and social life. And this approach is particularly valuable in studies where understanding the motivations, perceptions, and interpretations of individuals is key. So, an example, an ethnographer studies the community's religious rituals by participating in and observing the rituals, interviewing participants to understand their beliefs and experiences. And the researcher aims to interpret the meanings and significance of these rituals from the perspective of the community members. An example of interpretive understanding would be a sociologist investigates why people join social movements by trying to understand the motivations and beliefs of the participants. And so the researcher in this case engages with the participants to grasp their perspective and the social context that drives their action. An example for symbolic interactionism, a study of how teenagers use social media to shape their identity, focuses on the symbols and language they use in their posts, comments, and interactions, and the researcher analyzes how these symbols influence their self perception and social relationships. So, social ontology is a branch of philosophy and social theory that focuses on the nature and existence of social entities. And so it seeks to understand what kinds of objects, entities, and structures exist in the social world and how they relate to human behavior and social practice. So, the question, what kind of objects exist in the social world, prompts us to think about the various entities that populate the social world, such as institutions, norms, roles, relationships, and organizations. And social ontology explores whether these entities are real in the same way that physical objects are, or if they exist in a different, more abstract sense. The question, do social entities exist independently of our perceptions of them, is a central debate. For example, does a legal system or an economic market exist if no one recognizes or follows its rules? This question touches on whether social entities have an objective reality or if they are entirely dependent on human perception and agreement. So the question, is social reality external to social actors or constructed by them? That's exploring whether social reality is something that exists independently of individuals and their actions, or if it's constructed through social interactions and shared understandings. And the answer to this question has significant implication for how we study and understand social phenomenon. So, if social reality is external, it exists independently of individuals, and social entities can be studied as objective facts. If social reality is constructed, it suggests that our understanding of social entities is shaped by social actors through processes of communication, negotiation, and interpretation. And understanding social ontology is crucial because, as we, the refrain that we comment on frequently here is it shaped how we approach the study. So it influences whether we view social structures as fixed and external or as fluid and subject to change based on human interaction, and this understanding guides the methods and frameworks used in social research. Objective ontology in social science posits that social phenomenon exist independently of individual consciousness or perception, and this perspective views social structures, institutions, and norms as external realities that individuals must navigate and respond to. So, according to objective ontology, social phenomenon confront us as external facts. For example, institutions like the legal system, educational structures, or economic markets exist independently of any one person's beliefs or perceptions. These entities exert influence and impose constraints on individuals regardless of personal opinions. Pre-existing social world in this view holds that individuals are born into a pre-existing social world, and from the moment of birth people are embedded in a social environment with established norms, values, and institutions, and this pre-existing world shapes individuals' experiences, identities, and opportunities. And we look at pressure to conform. Objective ontology emphasizes that social forces and rules exert pressure on individuals to conform, and these social norms and institutional rules create expectations for behavior, and failure to adhere to these expectations can result in social sanctions. For example, laws compel obedience, and social norms guide behaviors like dress codes, manners, and communication styles. So, from an objective ontological perspective, social researchers might focus on identifying and analyzing the external structures and forces that shape individual and group behavior, and this could involve studying how laws, economic systems, or social hierarchies influence social outcomes. So, objective ontology offers a lens through which social reality is seen as fixed and external, shaping individuals' lives in significant ways, and understanding this perspective is essential for understanding and analyzing how social structures govern behavior and maintain social order. Constructionist ontology posits that social reality is not a fixed or objective entity, but is actively constructed by individuals and groups. And so this perspective emphasizes the role of human agency in creating, sustaining, and altering social phenomenon. And in this view, um, meanings are constructed by social actors through interactions and shared understanding. For example, concepts like gender, race, or class are seen not as objective realities, but as social constructs shaped by collective agreements and interpretations. And social reality is seen as continually accomplished and revised by social actors. And this means that social constructs are not static. They evolve over time as people negotiate and renegotiate their meanings and implications. And this ongoing process reflects the dynamic nature of social life. Um, Constructionist ontology also applies to the work of researchers. This accounts the accounts and interpretations provided by researchers are themselves constructions influenced by the researcher's perspective, context, and biases. And this acknowledgement opens up the possibility for multiple alternative interpretation of the same social phenomenon. Things like language and representation play a crucial role in shaping our perception of reality. And according to constructionist ontology, the words, symbols, and narratives we use to describe the world are not neutral. but actively shape our understanding of social reality. So, for example, how we talk about quote unquote success or quote unquote failure can influence how these concepts are perceived and acted upon in society. So, researchers operating from a constructionist perspective focus on understanding how social actors construct meaning and how these constructions influence social practices and institutions. And this might involve exploring the narratives, discourses, and symbols that individuals and groups use to make sense of their world. So, in conclusion, constructionist ontology provides a lens through which social reality is understood as a product of human interaction and interpretation. And this perspective challenges the idea of an objective social world, instead highlighting the fluid and contingent nature of social phenomenon. So these next two slides offers a framework for understanding the primary approaches to social research categorized into quantitative and qualitative methods, and each approach has distinct characteristics, making them suitable for different types of research questions. So quantitative research is generally used for studies that aim to test hypotheses or quantify variables across large samples, and it's more structured and relies heavily on statistical analysis, whereas qualitative research, again, is often employed to explore complex social phenomenon where context and meaning are crucial, and it's more flexible and seeks to understand participant perspectives. So these next two slides are really highlighting how these strategies differ based on their orientation, epistemological foundation, and ontological assumptions, which are critical for understanding the philosophical underpinnings of the chosen research method. And choosing between quantitative and qualitative methods depends on the nature of the research question, the researcher's philosophical stance, and the goals of the study. And understanding these differences is essential for effective research design. So here's some examples of a quantitative research project. A national survey is conducted to determine the relationship between education level and income across different regions, and the study collects numerical data from thousands of participants and uses statistical analysis to identify patterns and correlations. And the goal is to generalize the findings to the broader population, identifying trends that can inform policy decisions. Here's a qualitative research example. A researcher conducts in depth interviews with a small group of refugees to understand their experiences of integration into a new country. The study focuses on the participants' personal stories, exploring the complexities of their challenges and successes in adapting to a new culture. And the findings aim to provide rich, detailed insights rather than broad generalizations. This slide is beginning with an important caveat. And while we often discuss quantitative and qualitative research as distinct categories, the reality is a little bit more complex, and the divide between these approaches is not always clear cut, and many research studies blend both. So the statement, these are simple summaries only, reminds us that the summaries of quantitative and qualitative methods we've discussed are just that, simplifications. And so in practice, the distinction between these two approaches can blur, with many studies incorporating both qualitative and quantitative elements to provide a more comprehensive understanding of the research question. Many studies benefit from using both research strategies, and by combining quantitative data, which provides breadth, with qualitative insights, which will often provide depth, researchers can gain a more holistic view of the phenomenon they are studying. So, in Portinga, this study is an example of research that could utilize both quantitative and qualitative studies. The study examined the public trust in the government during the foot and mouth disease outbreak and how the public perceived the associated risks. And so quantitative methods might have been used to measure levels of trust and perceived risk across a large population, while qualitative methods could have explored the reasons behind these perceptions in greater depth through interviews or focus groups. And Beck's The Risk Society, the concept of the risk society offers a theoretical framework that can be explored through both quantitative and qualitative research. So, quantitative studies might measure the prevalence of perceived risks in different populations, while qualitative research might explore how individuals and communities understand and respond to these risks. So, Beck's work illustrates how complex social phenomena often require a more nuanced approach that can incorporate both types of data. So, In conclusion, the slide emphasizes that while quantitative and qualitative methods are often discussed separately, the best research frequently combines both, and understanding the strengths and limitations of each approach and how they can complement each other is key to conducting robust social science. So think about personal beliefs and your researcher's feeling. So researchers, like all people, hold personal beliefs and feelings that can influence their work, and these values might shape the choice of research topics, the framing of research questions, the interpretation of data, and the presentation of findings. Durkheim, a founding figure in sociology, famously argued that all preconceptions must be eradicated in the research process. He advocated for a value free approach to social science where researchers should strive to remain objective and eliminate any personal biases from their work. But values can affect every stage of the research process, from the formulation of the research question to the analysis and interpretation of the data. For instance, a researcher's values might influence which aspects of data are emphasized or downplayed, and how results are interpreted, and even how findings are communicated. So, while Durkheim argued for the eradication of preconceptions, some scholars advocate for value laden research where the researcher's values are acknowledged and even embraced as part of the research process. Howard Becker argued that social researchers often have a sympathy with underdog groups. He suggested that researchers should be aware of and transparent about their sympathies, as these can influence the direction and outcome of their research. Feminist scholars such as Oakley and Mize advocate for approaches that recognize and incorporate the researcher's values. And Oakley discusses the concept of reciprocity in feminist research, where the relationship between researcher and participants is more collaborative. Mize introduces the idea of conscious partiality, suggesting that researchers should actively align themselves with the subjects of their research, especially when studying marginalized or oppressed groups. So, in conclusion, this slide is emphasizing that while the traditional view in social science has been to strive for values through research, there is growing recognition of the role that values play in shaping research, and different scholars have different perspectives on whether these values should be minimized or openly integrated into the research process. Thank you.